They wore tailored suits, gave orders in whispers, and built empires in the shadows of American streets. Some ruled through fear, some through money, and some through the strange kind of fame that turns criminals into dark legends. But behind every nickname, every headline, and every bullet-ridden myth, there was a country changing shape through prohibition, poverty, corruption, illegal trade, and power. Tonight, we move from number 8 to number 1 through 8 of the most infamous gangster figures in American history. Not to glorify them, but to understand how they rose, why people feared them, and how their names became part of America's underworld memory. At number 8 is Larry Hoover. Unlike the old mob bosses who operated from smoky back rooms, Hoover became a symbol of the street gang era that reshaped urban crime in modern America. In Chicago, the gangster disciples grew from a violent neighborhood force into a far larger criminal network. Hoover's name carried weight far beyond one city block. It echoed through prisons, neighborhoods, and law enforcement files for decades. His story shows how organized crime in America did not end with the fedora and the cigar. It changed its clothes, changed its language, and moved with the times. At number 7 is Frank Lucas, the Harlem crime boss whose name still survives through cinema, rumor, and raw street mythology. Lucas rose in an era when the old mafia grip on major underground markets could be challenged by men bold enough to build their own supply lines. He understood something brutal and simple. Whoever controls the route controls the street. In the late 60s and early 70s, he became one of the most feared traffickers in New York's underworld. Frank Lucas did not just sell contraband. He sold an image of absolute control, and in neighborhoods already under pressure, that image became power. At number 6 is Bugsy Siegel, one of the earliest gangster celebrities in American crime history. He had charm, style, and a face that looked more like Hollywood than the underworld, but his reputation was built on violence. In New York, he rose through extortion, bootlegging, and the kind of ruthless enforcement that kept people obedient. Yet Siegel's legend grew even larger because he stood at the crossroads of organized crime and spectacle. His name became tied to the early development of Las Vegas, where crime money and ambition were beginning to pour into the desert. With Bugsy, the gangster was no longer just feared, he was becoming a national character. At number 5 is Whitey Bulger, the king of South Boston, a man whose power came from the perfect mix of intimidation, local loyalty, and corruption. Bulger was terrifying not only because of the murders linked to his name, but because he seemed untouchable for years. He ran the Winter Hill Gang, fed information to the FBI through corrupt relationships, and managed to stay alive in a world where betrayal usually ends quickly. Even after he disappeared, his shadow remained over Boston. Whitey Bulger represents a different kind of gangster story, not flashy, not theatrical, but cold, patient, and deeply rooted in one city's streets. At number 4 is Meyer Lansky, the financial brain of the underworld. He did not rely on showmanship the way others did. He relied on structure, numbers, partnerships, and discipline. While other gangsters built fear with bullets, Lansky built influence with money. He became one of the most important architects of organized crime in America, linking gambling, offshore interests, and syndicate power across multiple cities and beyond U.S. borders. His genius, if that word can even be used here, was understanding that crime could function like a corporation. Quiet men are often the most dangerous, and Lansky proved that a calm voice can sometimes build a larger empire than a loaded gun. At number 3 is John Gotti, the mob boss who turned criminal notoriety into media theater. As head of the Gambino crime family, Gotti made himself impossible to ignore. Expensive suits, confident swagger, cameras outside the courthouse. He looked less like a hunted man than a celebrity walking a red carpet. That image made him magnetic, but it also made him reckless. The press called him the Dapper Don, and for a time, the Teflon Don, because charges seemed to slide off him. But fame is dangerous in the underworld. The brighter the spotlight, the clearer the target. Gotti understood the power of attention, yet attention is often what destroys men who believe they can master it. At number 2 is Lucky Luciano, one of the central architects of the modern American mafia. If others were kings of neighborhoods, Luciano thought in systems. He helped reshape organized crime into a more coordinated national structure, turning chaos into order and old loyalties into a broader criminal machine. This was bigger than one gang and bigger than one city. Luciano's importance lies in the fact that he helped create a model that outlived the men who first built it. His legacy was not just violence, it was organization. And in the history of crime, organized power is always more dangerous than random brutality. And at number 1 stands Al Capone. No gangster casts a longer shadow over the American imagination. Scarface, Chicago, Prohibition, Tommy guns, headlines, fear. Capone became more than a crime boss. He became the face of an era when the line between politics, police, business, and bloodshed could nearly vanish. After serving Johnny Torrio and rising through Chicago's brutal underworld, he took control and dominated bootlegging, gambling, and vice with astonishing force. He inspired fear because his violence was real, but he fascinated the public because he understood performance. Capone knew how to look powerful, sound powerful, and make the entire country feel his presence. And yet, like so many men who seemed too large to fall, he was not destroyed by a dramatic shootout or a revenge killing, but by the slow, relentless hand of the law. That is what makes the story so compelling. From Hoover to Lucas, from Siegel to Bulger, from Lansky and Gotti to Luciano, and finally Capone, America's gangster history is also a history of transformation. Street gangs became syndicates. Neighborhood crews became national networks. Violence became business, and business became legend. But every legend in this world ends the same way: prison, betrayal, death, or decay. The names survive. The empires do not. And maybe that is the final truth behind all these men. They wanted power so badly that they made themselves unforgettable, but in the end, the fear they created outlived the lives they actually had.